something went wrong while generating the response. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help. OpenAI, calm. You stood in that room, you crossed a threshold. Now the question is simple. Will you rise with purpose or shrink into silence? So many men walk away from that moment not realizing what they just gave up, not the act, but the opportunity to step forward as someone real, someone grounded, someone unforgettable. See, when you walk out of her space or yours, what remains isn't the heat of what just happened. It's the impression you left behind. And not on her, on yourself. Because how you behave after says more about your future than any promise you've ever made. Your tone, your words, your presence, they echo in her memory, in your reputation, in the man you wake up as the next day. This is where so many fall apart. They confuse the high of the moment with connection. They chase the feeling and forget the meaning. And worse, they make the mistake of thinking that intimacy means attachment. It doesn't. It means responsibility. The responsibility to lead with clarity, to act with respect, and most importantly, to remember who you are, even when your emotions try to pull you into fantasy. You are not just a man who chases pleasure. You are a man who builds legacy. That means you can enjoy, but you don't lose yourself. You can connect, but you don't collapse into insecurity. It's easy to lie to yourself after, to convince yourself she feels the same, to act out of fear, fear of losing her, fear of being alone, fear of judgment. But those who move from fear stay trapped in circles. They repeat the same patterns, feel the same regrets, live the same quiet emptiness. You weren't born to live in repeat mode. You were built to evolve, so take the moment seriously, not with tension, not with ego, but with awareness. Sit with yourself in the silence that follows. Ask, am I proud of who I just was? Did I show up fully? Or was I just escaping? It's in that honesty, brutal, raw honesty, that transformation begins. Because you can't shift what you refuse to face. And here's something no one says out loud. If you feel confused after being with her, if your mind starts spinning with what now? Or what does this mean? That's not a sign to overthink. It's a sign to slow down, to stop seeking validation, to start seeking direction. Because if you don't know where you're going, you'll keep letting moments define you instead of defining your moments. Your time is too valuable. Your energy is too sacred. Your presence is too powerful to be wasted on second guessing. Lead yourself with firmness, with softness, with vision. The man who knows where he's going doesn't need to chase approval. He's not moved by temporary closeness. He's moved by alignment. That means if she's not walking the same path, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you respect the experience and keep moving, not with coldness, but with strength. This is what separates the boys from the men, not how many women you've had, but how many moments you've owned. And if you do want something more with her, then you owe it to both of you to be clear, to say it straight, to stand in your truth, not to manipulate, not to impress, but to express. Clarity builds trust. Ambiguity breeds anxiety. Lead with clarity. But understand this, she's watching. Not just how you held her, but how you hold yourself now. She can feel it when you fake it. She can sense it when you're unsure. And she can respect it when you're honest. Even if the honesty isn't what she wants to hear. Because respect lasts longer than attraction. And the man who's respected is the man she remembers. So when you leave, whether it's for the night or for good, leave with peace in your spirit. Not because everything went perfectly, but because you stayed true to your values, to your standards, to your direction. And if you're feeling that ache, that hunger for something deeper, more meaningful, let that guide you, not into another bed, but into a higher version of you. This is your call to rise, not just from the bed, but from the fog that's been dimming your potential. No more playing small, no more pretending you're okay with surface level, no more wasting time proving yourself to people who can't see your worth. You don't need more attention, you need more alignment. So walk forward with your head up, your vision clear, and your soul unshaken. You didn't come this far to stay average. You came to lead, to grow, to become the kind of man who inspires others simply by how he lives. Let every step from this moment forward echo one truth. You're not here to chase moments. You're here to create meaning, and meaning begins with you. You've started to understand now that the way you move after says everything about the way you live. But there's still something deeper, something most men never touch. It's the discipline to detach without disrespect, to walk away not with regret, but with wisdom. to know the difference between physical closeness and emotional alignment, to stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. Because what you allow after intimacy becomes what you tolerate in life. If you ignore your own discomfort, you'll keep saying yes to things that drain you. You'll silence your intuition to avoid conflict. You'll settle, not because she's enough, but because you don't believe you are. And that's the wound. The quiet, hidden pain that drives most men to seek approval through attention, to escape their own reflection through affection, to trade self-respect for short-term validation. But real growth begins when you stop needing to be needed, when you no longer depend on her reaction to define your value, when you can look her in the eye after everything and still walk away clean, clear, whole. Not because you're cold, not because you don't care, but because you finally understand. Your worth doesn't live in her approval. It lives in your alignment. You are not here to fill a gap. You are not here to prove you're enough. You are already enough when you live with integrity, with purpose, with boundaries. And boundaries aren't barriers. They are standards. A man with no standards will always feel lost, no matter how many women he's with. A man with strong standards feels peace, even when he walks alone. You must know what you're available for. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. What kind of energy are you letting into your life just because it looks good? How often do you let desire speak louder than discipline? This is not about guilt. This is not about shame. This is about elevation, because the more deeply you respect yourself, the more clearly you see through illusion. You begin to notice when the connection is real and when it's just comfort in disguise. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to stop settling. And when you stop settling, something powerful happens. You stop attracting chaos. You stop chasing attention. You start building environments where peace is normal, where mutual respect is the standard, where connection doesn't cost your clarity. This is what high-value men understand. They don't get lost in temporary emotions. They stay anchored in identity. They know what they want, and more importantly, they know what they won't accept. You have to ask yourself, did I just connect with someone who fuels me or empties me? Do I feel elevated or drained? Because that answer tells you everything. If you feel heavy, there's a reason. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Face it. It's not weakness to admit something doesn't feel right. It's wisdom. It's growth. It's power. Real men feel, and then they choose better. You are not the man who ghosts. You are not the man who clings. You are not the man who says one thing and does another. You are the man who can experience intimacy and still stand tall the next morning with full clarity of who he is and where he's going. That's rare, that's attractive, that's unstoppable. Because now you're no longer led by desire. You're led by vision. You're no longer at the mercy of emotion. You move with conviction. You're no longer trying to impress. You're just expressing truth. And that kind of energy,
it changes everything. It changes how she sees you. It changes how you see you.
It changes the quality of your relationships, your peace, your life. So stop pretending you don't care. You do care. You care about your path, your time, your future. You care about who you're becoming. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. That's why this message is hitting something real inside of you. Because deep down, you're not just chasing women. You're chasing meaning. And maybe for the first time, you're realizing that meaning starts when you stop running from yourself. So own the moment. Own the silence. Own the clarity. You don't need to fix her. You don't need to explain yourself to the world. You just need to stay true to the man you said you wanted to become. Let every word you speak after be rooted in self-awareness. Let every choice reflect your highest values. Let every step forward be one you don't have to question later. You've already proven you can attract. Now prove you can lead. Lead your emotions. Lead your energy. Lead your life. Because you weren't made for confusion. You were made for clarity. And clarity doesn't speak loudly. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It simply moves forward. When you lead with clarity, you stop chasing what isn't aligned. You stop performing. You stop bending just to be accepted. Because the man who honors himself doesn't beg to be understood. He moves in such a way that the right people feel his intention without him saying a word. But here's what you have to understand now. Most men are living in reaction. Reacting to her energy, reacting to past wounds, reacting to fear. They let their emotions drive their behavior, then wonder why they feel out of control. You are not here to react. You are here to respond. from presence, from strength, from choice. That space after intimacy, it's where your habits show. It's where your discipline, or lack of it, exposes itself. Do you fall back into neediness? Do you lose yourself in her mood? Or do you remain centered, aware, grounded? Because that's the real power, being able to stay you in any situation. Not shifting to please, not shrinking to avoid tension, just holding your ground with calm, confident energy. Women don't remember the man who was perfect. They remember the man who was certain of his values, certain of his words, certain of his direction. So when the moment is over and you're still with her, or even if you're not, you need to hold your internal posture, that invisible spine, that unshakable self-respect. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stay congruent. When she senses that you don't lose yourself in the moment, you become unforgettable. Not because you gave her everything, but because you didn't give her you too easily. You stayed rooted. You stayed aware. And that's what builds trust, not only with her, but with yourself. See, you've done the surface level game before. You've tried being who they wanted you to be. You've played cool. You've played emotional. You've run the cycle of empty highs followed by quiet disappointment. And it's because you were acting like a man who needed to be chosen. But here's the truth. You don't need to be chosen. You need to choose yourself. Every time, especially after moments that feel vulnerable, especially after you've shared energy, space, and presence, that's when self-respect matters most. Because that's when most men get soft. Not emotionally soft, energetically soft. They forget their frame. They trade clarity for comfort. They try to hold on to the feeling instead of anchoring into their mission. But intimacy doesn't mean your mission stops. It doesn't mean your standards drop. If anything, it means you rise even higher, because now you're leading not just yourself, but your energy within someone else's space. That's a responsibility, not a trophy. And if she's the kind of woman who's truly ready, she will respect a man who moves with discipline. She'll be drawn to your calm. She'll trust your pace. She'll admire your honesty. But more importantly, you will trust you. You'll look back at the moment and feel proud. Proud not because it was perfect. Proud because you stayed true to who you are. This is rare in the world today. Most people are addicted to the feeling of being wanted. They chase moments that validate their insecurity. They avoid silence because silence forces reflection. But not you. You lean into silence. You let the stillness speak because you know that growth lives in the space between the noise. It's where your next decision is made, and it's where you either repeat the cycle or break it. Every time you honor your values, you make a crack in the old pattern. Every time you choose peace over performance, you break another link in the chain, and eventually you're not the same man anymore. You're not reacting from wounds. You're responding from wisdom. That's when your energy shifts. You stop trying to be the guy. You start becoming the man. The one who isn't swayed by temporary closeness. The one who doesn't give up his center just to keep someone happy. The one who knows if it's real, it won't require self-abandonment. And if it's not real, then no amount of pretending will save it. Let that sink in. Because pretending is the most exhausting life you'll ever live. So take the moment for what it was, a connection, a reflection, a choice. But don't build a future on a feeling that doesn't match your values. If it aligned, let it grow, honestly. If it didn't, let it go, respectfully. That's what mature masculinity looks like. That's what true confidence feels like. Not loud, not desperate, not controlling. Just still, steady, solid. And that man doesn't chase approval. He attracts alignment. When you start attracting alignment, everything changes. You're no longer caught in games. You're no longer triggered by distance. You don't chase texts. You don't panic over silence. Because your identity isn't tied to whether she stays or goes. This is where freedom begins. Not in controlling outcomes, but in controlling your intention. You stop living for the next reply. You start living for your next step forward. You wake up without anxiety. You move through your day with calm. Not because everything's certain, but because you are. Most men never reach this level. They stay addicted to reaction. They stay caught in the loop of what does she think? What does this mean? They become prisoners to someone else's opinion. And slowly, they trade their edge for approval. But you're different now. You've seen too much. You've felt the cost of betraying yourself. You know what it's like to pretend you're fine just to keep her comfortable. You know what it's like to give more than you mean, to say more than you feel, to lose yourself just to be accepted. And you also know that path leads nowhere, only to burnout, only to resentment, only to a quiet war between your truth and your fear. But fear doesn't lead anymore, because clarity lives here now, because you've committed to truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs the moment, because the man who honors his truth always wins in the long run. Maybe not the short-term comfort, maybe not the temporary validation, but he wins himself. And that's the one victory no one can take away. So when you've just shared a moment of closeness with a woman, remember, your energy afterward defines you, not in her eyes, first in your own. Do you walk away empowered or empty? Do you feel connected or confused? Did you give from strength or perform from fear? These aren't casual questions. They're checkpoints for your evolution. They're the mirror you need to face, not just in relationships, but in life. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. If you lie to yourself in intimacy, you'll lie to yourself in business. If you ignore red flags in her, you'll ignore red flags in yourself. If you avoid uncomfortable truth, you'll always avoid the growth that truth leads to. And that's why so many stay stuck, not because they're incapable, but because they won't sit still long enough to listen. They keep filling the silence, avoiding the lesson, repeating the moment, but silence is where the signal speaks. It's where you hear the difference between chemistry and connection, between desire and direction, or between fantasy and truth. This is what real men are made of. Not noise, not performance, not bravado. Stillness, precision, integrity. A man who can hold his energy after intimacy is a man who holds power in every room. He doesn't retreat in shame. He doesn't cling in desperation. He simply observes, reflects, chooses. And that's magnetic because it's rare, because it's real. So ask yourself right now, what kind of man do you want to be remembered as? Not just by her, by you, by your future self, by the people you lead, by the standard you walk in. Because legacy isn't built in big moments. It's built in how you carry the small ones, the ones no one sees, the ones that happen in silence, the ones that test your alignment. You already know the version of you that bends. You already know the version that hides behind charm, behind humor, behind indifference. But it's time to walk into the man who no longer needs to pretend. The man who says what he means, who holds what he values, who can walk away, not to prove a point, but because his peace means more than his ego. That's the man who wins in every area, not because he dominates others, but because he's mastered himself. And that's where it all leads back to. Not her, not what happened, not the message that went unread, not the moment that left you wondering. It all comes back to you, your values, your presence, your truth. So don't chase clarity from someone who can't give it. Be the clarity, live it, speak it, stand in it. And let every experience sharpen your awareness. Let every moment build your character. Let every decision remind you, you were never meant to live small. You were built to lead. And leadership always starts within. Leadership starts the moment you stop negotiating with your standards, the moment you stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. Because a man who explains too much is a man still asking for permission. And the truth is, you don't need permission to live by principle. You just need the courage to stay consistent when it's hard. Most don't. They fold when connection feels good but lacks depth. They silence themselves when they feel tension, afraid it might push her away. They dim their truth because they fear being alone more than they fear being misaligned. But let this be clear, there's no reward for betraying yourself. You don't win by staying in something that doesn't feed your peace. You don't grow by holding back your voice just to protect someone else's comfort. You rise by honoring your internal compass even when it leads you into solitude. Because solitude isn't your enemy, it's your mirror. It's the space where your vision gets louder than your urges. It's where your decisions become clean, not clouded by emotion. And when your decisions are clean, your life becomes magnetic, not just to women, to peace, to purpose, to power. This is where most men get it wrong. They think value comes from what they give away, from how much they can prove, from how many people say yes to them. But the truth is, value comes from how often you say yes to yourself. Every time you uphold your boundaries, you add to your strength. Every time you walk away from misalignment, you sharpen your focus. Every time you remain grounded in a moment where others would fold, you multiply your authority, not over others, but over your own life. And there is no deeper confidence than that. You don't need to dominate people to feel powerful. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. You need to walk into every space knowing exactly who you are and exactly who you are not, because clarity is louder than charm. Conviction is more attractive than confusion, and integrity always outlasts intensity. What you do after intimacy is the test most never prepare for. They prepare for the chase, they learn the moves, the words, the game, but they don't prepare to stand tall after the desire fades. They don't prepare to be consistent after the heat cools. They don't prepare to lead beyond the moment. But that's what separates the temporary from the timeless. That's what defines whether you're just another experience, or the one who leaves a lasting imprint. Because the man who stays consistent after doesn't just talk about self-worth, he walks it. He doesn't switch up when the moment ends. He doesn't ghost. He doesn't panic. He doesn't prove. He remains steady, honest, clear, not because he's trying to earn anything, but because he already owns who he is. And this ownership, it changes the way people feel around you. They sense the certainty. They sense the stillness. They feel safe, not because you say all the right things, but because you are the right thing. This doesn't come from reading books. It doesn't come from watching videos. It comes from choosing over and over to stand in your truth, even when your body wants to compromise, even when your mind tries to justify what your heart knows isn't real. Discipline in those moments is what forges real masculinity. Not control over her, but control over you, over your patterns, over your energy, over your standard. That's what makes you dangerous in the best way, because nothing can pull you out of alignment. Not lust, not loneliness, not approval. You lead, not follow. You direct, not drift. You command your life without having to raise your voice. And from that posture, you attract women who are ready. Not just ready for fun, but ready for truth, ready for depth, ready for the kind of connection that doesn't burn fast and die. The kind that builds, the kind that lasts. But it starts with you. How you show up when no one's watching. How you respond after the feelings fade. How you lead when things feel unclear. So stop trying to control her next move. Control yours. Choose it with precision. Move with honor. Hold your line. Let your silence say what your standards already declared. Let your presence remind her, this is a man who's not here to play roles. He's here to live truth. He's here to protect his energy. He's here to build, not impress. And that kind of man doesn't need to be remembered, because his impact lingers long after he's gone. Not because of what he did in the moment, but because of who he chose to be after it. Impact that lingers is not about being unforgettable in her memory. It's about being unshakable in your essence. Because at the end of the day, her memory fades, her emotions shift, her needs evolve, but who you are, that must remain. If your identity depends on someone else validating it, then you don't own it. You're renting it. You're borrowing your power from how she responds. And that's not power. That's performance. You weren't built to perform. You were built to lead. To walk into every room, every relationship, every situation with the quiet force of a man who doesn't need to prove anything, because he's already chosen himself. But choosing yourself doesn't mean you shut down connection. It means you don't lose yourself inside of it. It means you stay whole even when the moment is intimate. It means you remain sovereign even when the lines blur. Because if the connection costs your clarity, it's not worth keeping. If the closeness clouds your conviction, it's not real intimacy. It's emotional escape. And most people are escaping, running from themselves into the arms of someone who makes them forget. But you're not here to forget. You're here to remember your mission, your values, your non-negotiables. That's what anchors you after the moment fades. That's what keeps your integrity sharp when the emotions get loud. That's what makes you a man she can feel without effort, because your presence speaks before your mouth ever opens. The moment after intimacy is a mirror. It reflects your level of leadership, not just in how you treat her, but in how you carry yourself. Are you still intentional, still respectful, still driven, or do you drop your edge the second you feel close? Too many men collapse after closeness. They confuse emotional openness with abandoning their mission. They confuse connection with codependency. They forget that intimacy is not the goal, it's the byproduct of truth. When you live in your truth, you create space for intimacy to grow. But when you bend your truth to keep intimacy alive, you create confusion. You dilute your strength. You plant doubt in both her mind and yours. This is the beginning of disconnection, not when words are spoken, but when self-respect is quietly given away. That's why it matters what you do after. Because after is when the high fades. It's when reality returns. It's when your inner compass has to take over. If you've done the work, you'll lead. You'll stand in that space with honor, not trying to manipulate her next move, not trying to control what she feels, just grounded, still, clear. That clarity is rare. And that's why it's powerful. It doesn't shout, it doesn't convince, it doesn't adjust itself to fit in. It simply is. And it teaches others how to treat you without ever needing a lecture. A woman feels it. She knows when a man respects himself. She knows when he won't tolerate less than what aligns. She knows when his kindness is rooted in confidence, not need. And that makes all the difference. Because when she sees that you're still strong after the moment, when you're not changing your tone, chasing approval, or acting unsure, that's when her respect deepens. Not because you were perfect, but because you were consistent. Consistency is the secret most never talk about. It's the quiet engine behind all power, not just how you act in public, but how you show up when emotions are high and no one's watching. It's easy to be solid when everything's under control. It's easy to be composed when there's nothing at stake. But the real measure of your growth is who you become when your heart is open and the outcome is unknown. That's when the test comes. Not from her, from you. Will you stay the course? Will you remain principled? Will you continue to honor yourself even when your ego begs for comfort? Every time you do, you train your mind to trust your character. You build a foundation that no moment can shake. And from that foundation, your life starts to rise. With peace, or with precision, with power. This is what separates men who chase from men who choose. The chasers are driven by fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of being alone. The choosers are driven by alignment. Alignment with values, with purpose, with the vision they refuse to compromise. So ask yourself now, without distraction, without noise, who are you when the moment is over, when the feeling fades, when the room is quiet? Because that's where greatness is born, not in the intensity of the fire, but in how you hold yourself when the flame dims, when the room cools, when it's just you and your reflection. That reflection doesn't lie. It remembers every decision you made, every standard you held, every time you said yes to your truth instead of someone else's comfort. So live in a way that makes that reflection proud. Because at the end of the day, that's the only approval that ever really mattered. Because when all the noise fades, all the people leave, all the feelings settle, you're left with one person, you. And that version of you, that quiet man staring back in the mirror, he knows the truth. He knows whether you move from strength or weakness. He knows whether you led or followed. He knows whether you honored your standard or sold it for a moment of attention. And no external validation can silence the voice of that knowing. That's why most men keep running. They don't want to face the stillness. They fear the confrontation with themselves. Because deep down, they know they've been shrinking to be liked. They've been pretending to be grounded, when really they're terrified of being alone. They've been offering depth while living shallow, and they've called it connection when it's really been control. But you weren't born to shrink. You weren't made to be forgettable. You're not here to live reactive, scattered, or emotionally fragile. You're here to embody discipline, emotional mastery, and truth. That's where peace lives. Not in how she feels about you, but in how deeply you're aligned with you. When a man builds that kind of alignment, he becomes unbreakable. Not because life gets easier, but because his center holds. Through chaos, through silence, through rejection, through success. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't fall apart. He doesn't hand his self-worth over like a gift hoping someone keeps it. He owns it. And when you own your worth, you stop playing games for love. You stop confusing chemistry for compatibility. You stop turning red flags into projects. You stop hoping someone chooses you, and you start choosing yourself. That's the shift that sets everything in motion. Because when you no longer need her to give you something you've already built internally, your power multiplies. And ironically, that's what makes you most magnetic. Not your status, not your looks, not your performance, your peace. Peace is rare, and rare always commands attention. So when you walk out of that intimate moment, and your energy is still centered, still grounded, still clear, that's when everything changes. Because she feels it. She senses the difference between a man who gave from fullness and a man who gave hoping to be filled. One walks away with clarity, the other walks away with confusion. One remains sovereign. The other becomes emotionally entangled. You're not here to be entangled. You're here to be free. Free from the inner chaos that drives most men into unhealthy patterns. free from the need to be everything for someone who isn't even clear on what they want, free from the obsession with keeping someone who was never yours to begin with, because you know that what's real cannot be taken, and what aligns will always remain. So there's no more clinging, no more overthinking, no more spiraling. Only action rooted in strength, only words born from truth, only connections built on mutual respect. Not fantasy, not illusion, not fear. This is the power of emotional discipline. It allows you to feel everything, but be owned by nothing. It allows you to love without losing yourself, to care without controlling, to give without expecting anything in return, because your identity doesn't depend on what comes back. That's what makes you different. That's what elevates you above the noise. You don't chase love. You become the man love is drawn to, because your energy is clean, your motives are pure, and your self-respect is non-negotiable. Every time you move like this, you reinforce your foundation. Every time you hold your line, even in moments of vulnerability, you become stronger. Not hard, not closed, just deeply rooted. Rooted in purpose, rooted in self-worth, rooted in the quiet understanding that you're not for everyone, and that's the point. You weren't built to blend in. You were built to lead, to set a standard so sharp, so clear that it naturally filters out anything that isn't meant to walk beside you, not from arrogance, but from awareness. Because the more you value your energy, the less you'll allow it to be drained by inconsistency, confusion, or chaos. Let others chase fast feelings. Let them loop through cycles of hot and cold, mixed signals, emotional roller coasters. You stay steady. You stay focused. You stay aligned. Because your life is too valuable to be tossed around by someone else's indecision. Your future is too powerful to be paused, waiting for someone to realize your worth. You already know your worth. And because of that, you move different. You rise without rushing. You connect without clinging. You love without losing center. This is what makes a man truly dangerous, in the best way. He's not swayed by the temporary. He's not manipulated by the moment. He's mastered the art of holding his frame while opening his heart. That's not common, but nothing great ever is. Greatness doesn't come to the man who reacts. It comes to the man who responds, who thinks, who feels, but never folds. The moment you feel something real with her, connection, closeness, chemistry, you're tempted to drop your guard, to get soft, to lose your edge in the name of being open. And yes, vulnerability is strength, but only when it's rooted in discipline. Because without it, vulnerability becomes weakness disguised as romance. And weakness is what kills respect. Quietly, slowly, irreversibly. If you let the moment of intimacy convince you that your work is done, you're already drifting. She may not say it. She may even smile. But underneath, she's watching. Not your words, not your promises, your behavior, your posture, your energy. She's reading whether you're still standing on your values or slipping into a version of yourself molded by emotion and need. She's sensing whether you're centered or secretly hoping the connection saved you from something you haven't yet faced within. Every real woman is instinctively drawn to strength. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that doesn't disappear. The kind that remains when emotions rise, when hormones fade, when silence falls. The kind that stays sharp even when the world goes soft. That's the man she remembers. That's the man she respects. But you don't become that man by chance. You become him by choice, by deciding that who you are when no one's watching is more important than how you're perceived when they are, by knowing that real power isn't loud, it's still, it doesn't chase, it doesn't plead, it doesn't bend just to avoid the discomfort of disappointment. It stands, because there will be moments when she pulls away, when she tests without realizing it. When her own fears rise and she subconsciously wants to know, is this man for real? Is he consistent? Is he grounded in something deeper than desire? And if you flinch, if you try to convince her, if you start explaining your worth instead of living it, she'll feel it. Respect won't be lost in a big explosion. It'll dissolve in silence, slowly, quietly, until what once felt magnetic becomes forgettable. Not because you weren't enough, but because you forgot to remain yourself. You see, it's not the first impression that matters most, it's the follow-through. Any man can impress for a night, but very few can stay sharp when emotions rise. Very few can hold their standard when the room goes quiet. Very few can love while remaining free. Freedom is the ultimate flex, and you only get it when you stop making someone else's reaction your measurement of worth. That's the shift. You go from seeking validation to radiating truth, from hoping to be chosen to choosing yourself, from waiting for a sign to being the signal. That's when your energy becomes undeniable. Because it's rooted in self-respect, not strategy. And here's the truth. When you stop needing to be liked, you become deeply respected. When you stop trying to be perfect, you become trusted. When you stop adjusting your standards to keep her interested, you become the one she silently admires, even when she doesn't say a word. Because leadership in relationships isn't about control, it's about clarity. About making decisions from alignment, not emotion. About being so in tune with your core that you don't flinch when things shift. Most men chase closeness because they're running from their own void. They're using her attention to avoid looking in the mirror. But no one can fill you. No moment can replace purpose. No touch can heal a man who has abandoned himself. You must return to yourself fully, unapologetically, because only then will you understand what it means to show up in love without losing your center. That's why it's not just about what you say after the moment. It's how you move. Do you go right back to your mission? Do you remain present but not passive? Do you hold space without losing form? She doesn't need you to be cold. She needs you to be solid. She needs to feel that even in the softness of the moment, your frame remains, that she can lean into you without worrying you'll collapse under the weight of her emotions. That's what makes a man unforgettable. Not how intense he was in bed, but how stable he was after. Not how romantic he sounded, but how consistent he remained. Not how much he said he cared, but how little he lost himself while caring. Because the truth is, love isn't proven in the heat of the moment. It's proven in the silence that follows, in the integrity you hold when the high fades, in the way you walk out of her presence with the same grounded energy you walked in with. That's the edge. That's the difference. That's what separates boys from men, lovers from leaders, noise from legacy. And your legacy begins the moment you stop living for her response and start living from your own standard. When you stop waiting for permission to be powerful, when you stop asking for affirmation to stay grounded. The world is filled with men who can impress for a moment, but it's starving for men who can lead through a lifetime. Be that man. Most men want to be respected. Few are willing to do what it takes to be respectable. Respect isn't built through charm. It isn't earned in the bedroom. It's revealed in discipline, in restraint, in presence. When a man holds himself with that kind of integrity, it's felt before a word is spoken. She might not say it out loud, but her instincts will recognize it. She'll feel it in how you carry yourself, how you look at her, how you don't rush to please, impress, or over-explain. That's the posture of a man who has done the work. You become that man by facing the truth, especially the truth about your patterns. You stop blaming her for leaving and start asking yourself why you made her your oxygen. You stop calling it love when it was really attachment. You stop pretending that every connection was divine when it was really just a distraction from your own lack of self-worth. That's what most won't admit, that sometimes the need to be close to her came from being far from yourself. It's easy to seek her warmth when you've been cold inside. But a woman is not your healing. She's not your therapist. She's not your savior. And when you expect her to fix what you haven't faced, you set both of you up for failure. Because no matter how good the moment felt, it cannot carry the weight of unhealed wounds. No matter how strong the chemistry, it cannot substitute the work you must do in solitude. No matter how intimate the experience, it does not guarantee emotional maturity. So what do you do the morning after? You recommit to your discipline. You don't get lost in the high. You return to your purpose with even more clarity. You don't overanalyze what it meant or cling to what you hope it becomes. You respect what it was, and you use it as feedback about where you are emotionally, what you're ready for, and how well you're holding your frame. Because holding your frame is not about being rigid. It's about staying aligned, not shrinking into performance, not expanding into neediness, just being fully, firmly, and unapologetically. When you can do that, you stop losing yourself in people. You stop turning every romantic moment into a new identity. You stop switching your priorities just to chase the potential of connection, and you begin to move like a man who knows who he is, even when emotions are high. That kind of steadiness creates safety, not just for her, but for you. It protects your peace. It sharpens your vision. It preserves your self-respect. It allows you to give fully without losing your edge, to love deeply without losing your grip, to be present without becoming dependent. You're not here to sacrifice your direction for her affection. You're here to invite her into your world, not abandon yours for hers. That's the balance. That's what she wants, even if she doesn't say it. A man who can feel but doesn't fall. a man who can open but still lead, a man who brings depth but still walks with direction. That kind of man doesn't need constant validation. He doesn't ask for reassurance after every interaction. He knows that clarity comes from consistency, not control. That love doesn't bloom from chasing. It grows in truth, in freedom, in alignment. So you don't text out of panic. You don't call just to hear her voice because you're afraid of silence. You don't obsess over her response or timeline. You operate from stillness. You give space. You let her come toward you without force. And if she doesn't, you don't chase. You choose. You choose peace over confusion. You choose growth over emotional chaos. You choose your path over detours that lead nowhere. You let go without bitterness. You move on without resentment. You stay open, but you never fold, because you understand that what's meant for you never has to be forced. And what's not meant for you will always require you to become someone you're not just to keep it. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. You've betrayed yourself enough. Now it's time to build. Now it's time to lead. Now it's time to hold the line, not just with her, but with yourself. Because the moment after matters more than the moment before. Anyone can step in with confidence. Only a few can walk away with clarity, composure, and purpose intact. You become that man not by accident, but by decision. Daily, relentlessly, privately. You stop negotiating with your values. You stop bending for validation. You stop explaining your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. You simply be, fully, authentically, boldly. And in that posture, you don't just earn respect, you command it. Quietly, powerfully, without needing to prove a thing. The truth is, the world doesn't need more men who bend under pressure, who fold when emotions rise, who sacrifice their identity just to keep a fleeting connection alive. The world needs men who stand tall, who are unmoved by external noise, who don't need someone else's approval to know their own worth. And if you want to be the kind of man who commands respect without asking for it, you need to understand this. Your energy is the most valuable currency you have. When you give it away recklessly, hoping it will come back to you in some form of affection, approval, or validation, you devalue yourself. But when you hold your energy with the same level of respect that you wish to receive from others, you begin to radiate a quiet power that is impossible to ignore. That's where true confidence lies. Not in what you do to please others, but in what you refuse to do because you know it would cost you your dignity, your peace, your authenticity. You have to get comfortable with this idea. No one can ever make you feel whole. No connection, no relationship, no moment of intimacy can fill the void if you haven't already filled it within yourself. The moment you place the responsibility for your happiness, for your emotional stability in someone else's hands, you've already lost the game. You've allowed someone to occupy a space in your life they don't deserve, and they won't respect you for it. Because here's the brutal truth. People respect strength, but they fear neediness. And neediness comes from the belief that without them you're incomplete. It comes from the fear of being alone, of facing your own thoughts, of standing firm in your own truth without someone else validating it. But strength doesn't need validation. Strength stands alone. It doesn't need constant reassurance to feel worthy. It doesn't need constant attention to feel seen. When you're truly strong, you can walk into any room, meet any person, and remain exactly who you are, no matter how they react, no matter what they say, no matter how they make you feel. This is the kind of man you need to become. The kind of man who doesn't adjust his energy to fit the moment. The kind of man who holds his space, regardless of what's happening around him. The kind of man who is not swayed by temporary emotions, but is guided by a deeper, more powerful sense of purpose. And if you truly want to maintain that inner peace, that emotional strength, you have to stop playing games with yourself. Stop telling yourself you're okay when you're not. Stop pretending that everything is fine when your actions say otherwise. Stop seeking external sources of comfort when the only place it can come from is within. When you can stop pretending, stop seeking, and just be, that's when you step into a power that is untouchable. That's when you stop being swayed by someone else's highs and lows. That's when you realize you've been the one in control the entire time. There's no magic formula for this, no secret trick. The key to standing tall, to maintaining your inner peace, is not in any grand gesture or external achievement. It's in your daily commitment to your own values, your own worth, and your own peace of mind. Every time you make a decision that aligns with your values instead of your emotional impulses, you reinforce your power. Every time you choose to walk away from a situation that drains you, even when it hurts, you reaffirm your strength. Every time you say no to something that doesn't serve your higher purpose, you strengthen your resolve. Because here's the reality. Relationships, intimate or otherwise, are not about what you can get from the other person. They are about what you can give and how you can grow together without losing who you are in the process. You are not a project. You are not someone to be fixed, validated, or saved. You are whole. You are complete. And when you operate from that understanding, your relationships become a natural extension of who you are, not a desperate search to fill what's missing. And the moment you stop chasing after approval, stop looking for validation in every interaction, stop negotiating your worth for someone else's affection, that's when you unlock a power that is magnetic. It's not about what you do or how much you give. It's about the unspoken energy you emit, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are enough just as you are. When you embrace this, when you stop putting the weight of your happiness on someone else's shoulders, you give them the freedom to choose you for who you truly are, not for who you pretend to be. And that's when the connection becomes real. Not because it was forced, not because it was manipulated, but because it was built on a foundation of mutual respect, self-awareness, and freedom. This is where true emotional freedom begins, not in the need for someone else to love you, but in the ability to love yourself fully and unapologetically. This is what attracts not only respect, but deep, authentic connection. This is what makes you stand out from the rest. So, as you continue your journey, remember this. Stop looking for validation in all the wrong places. Stop bending your energy to fit someone else's expectations. Build yourself first. Commit to your growth, your peace, and your purpose. And everything else will follow. Because when you stand strong in your own truth, you become the kind of man who can lead with both strength and grace. You become the kind of man who doesn't need to chase respect or affection, because both are drawn to you naturally. You are already whole. You are already enough, and that is your greatest power. The hardest part about growth is not the change, it's the discomfort that comes with it. Every step toward higher standards, stronger boundaries, and unshakable confidence will challenge you. It will push you to question yourself, your habits, and the very things you used to find comfort in. But this is where the real work is done. The man you're becoming is built in the fire of discomfort. He's forged through the moments when you feel weak, uncertain, or tempted to fall back into old patterns. It's easy to be strong when everything is going your way, when your emotions are steady and the world is aligned with your desires. But that strength is fragile. It's the true test of your resolve when the world tries to shake you that you see who you really are. True power doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from standing tall in it, from staring fear in the face, and deciding that you won't be moved. The path of growth isn't about avoiding the tough moments. It's about choosing to remain focused and grounded, even when everything inside you wants to give in. There will be times when you feel tempted to revert to old ways, to seek validation through temporary fixes, to act out of need instead of strength. But when you recognize this moment for what it is, a test, you'll be able to move through it. This is where you separate yourself from the crowd of men who make excuses, who blame their circumstances, or who let emotions dictate their actions. You rise above it, not because you're invincible, but because you understand that real strength is not an external display. It's an internal decision. The truth is, the moment you start holding yourself to a higher standard, you'll lose people. You'll lose moments. You'll lose comfort, but you'll gain something far greater, a life built on your own terms, a respect that you don't need to ask for, and a peace that no one can take from you. You won't have to worry about who's in your life. The right people, the people who truly align with your values, will gravitate toward you. They won't demand that you shrink to fit their comfort zone. They will respect you for the man you've become because they know you didn't settle for the easy way out. You chose growth. You chose discipline. You chose purpose. And that's the difference between living a life of quiet strength versus one of quiet desperation. Desperation is the trap that too many men fall into. It's the belief that if they just bend a little more, if they just do a little more, if they just give a little more, they will finally get what they want. But it's a trap. It's a game you'll never win, because desperation devalues you. It makes you disposable. It makes you something to be used and discarded. And deep down, you know it. But strength, the kind of strength that comes from self-respect, from living by your own standards, from holding your frame, creates a magnetic pull. It invites people to lean in, not because they feel sorry for you, but because they sense something in you that cannot be faked. They see the quiet confidence, the man who is not afraid to stand alone when necessary, the man who doesn't bend to fit someone else's narrative. And this kind of strength is not about putting on a front. It's not about showing off how much you don't need anyone. It's about simply knowing that you don't need anyone's validation to be whole. You are complete on your own. And when you choose to share yourself with someone, it is because you want to, not because you have to. When you can stand in that truth, when you can remain grounded in who you are, you'll find that your relationships become infinitely more meaningful. Not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. Because you don't expect anyone to complete you. You're already complete, and you're looking for someone to walk alongside you, not to make you feel like you're enough, but because they see you for who you truly are, and they respect that. This is the kind of relationship that thrives, the kind that's built on mutual respect, where both people stand as individuals, not as needy halves trying to complete each other. And this is the kind of power you carry when you've done the work to become the best version of yourself. The world can't shake you, not because you're invincible, but because you know your worth. You know what you bring to the table. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need to prove yourself. You just are. This is where the true magic happens. You stop living for validation. You stop looking for signs of approval. You stop putting all your energy into winning people's affection. Instead, you focus on becoming the person who radiates confidence, purpose, and self-respect. And from there, everything else flows. When you give up the need to be validated, when you stop chasing affection and approval, that's when you'll find the kind of love, respect, and loyalty you've been looking for all along. Not because you were desperate for it, but because you already embodied it. And the world, without fail, will respond to the man who is not moved by the superficial, but is instead rooted in something deep, something real. This is how you begin to rise, how you step into your true power. How you become the kind of man who is impossible to ignore, not because you seek attention, but because your presence alone demands it. And in that presence, you'll inspire others to do the same, to rise, to stand tall, to lead with strength and integrity. You can have the life, the relationships, the respect you've always desired, but it all starts with this, making the decision today, right now, to commit to your own growth, your own strength, your own purpose, to stand tall even when it's uncomfortable, to remain grounded even when the world wants to shake you, to lead yourself first so that others will follow. And when you do this, you'll discover a life more fulfilling than you ever imagined, a life of unwavering confidence, respect, and a sense of peace that no one can take from you. This is the power of a man who knows who he is. And this is the man the world needs more of. The truth is, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of your comfort zone. Every breakthrough, every ounce of growth, every real connection, none of it exists within the confines of what feels easy, familiar, or safe. Growth demands discomfort.